In this video, we're going to be replacing the front wheel bearing in this 1997 Ford F-250. So let's get to work. If we're going to be replacing the wheel bearing, I should probably show you why. On a wheel bearing on a truck like this, if you grab at the top and bottom, you may need a pry bar, but wiggle in and out just a bit. And I know you can't, maybe you can see that on camera, but there is some play in there. I did already check the ball joints. They are good. I do know this is a wheel bearing problem, but to be fair, this is a 22-year-old plow truck, so yeah, I could see having a wheel bearing problem. All right, let me bring you guys in and see if I can give you a little better of a close-up here on what we're dealing with. Now, I know you may not be able to see that, but I think for sure you can definitely hear it, and that noise, that play, is absolutely a problem. I'm really glad that I noticed this problem when I did. If you're driving around with a loose wheel bearing or a failing wheel bearing, not only is it going to cause your tire to wear improperly, but it's also going to fail in a catastrophic way at some point and leave you probably stranded. So I'm really glad I caught this when I did. That's one of the things my dad really pounded into my head when I was little. He said, pay attention. And I think that's one of the most important lessons and one of the most important pieces of advice I would share with anyone today, whether it's a young person or an older person that wanted my opinion. I would just say pay attention to what is going on around you. But I think if more people paid attention, we would not have nearly the problems that we're faced with today. But that's just me. That's just me and my old-fashioned, traditional, unpopular, no longer welcome opinion. Or at least that's what modern society would have us believe, right? Tradition is revolutionary. I saw somebody had posted that the other day, and I thought, you know, in this day and age, that's really becoming quite true. A lot of people might say, oh, you could have just have adjusted those old bearings and you don't really have to replace them. And well, I disagree. Sorry, I had to grab a paper towel there to sit all this out on. I have never found a set of these hardened, tapered roller bearings that had worn enough to need adjustment that did not realistically just need to be replaced. These bearings and races are made out of some super hard material. If that stuff is wearing, it's pretty well done for, I think. Remember, folks, I'm not necessarily going to call this a how-to video as much as just a what I did video. But if we're replacing this bearing anyway, I don't think we can hurt it any more than what it is. All right, so the bearing and the seal fell out. Now let's get the race. A lot of people will reuse races. I don't like doing that. I will if I don't have a choice, but for the most part, a bearing and a race are going to wear together, so replace them together. Now these came out pretty easily compared to what I've done in the past. But one trick you can do if these races are really stuck, or any kind of bearing race like this, is while the race is still installed, obviously, because you can't get it out, take like this, get to it, take a welder and weld a bead carefully. Don't spatter anything in there, but weld a circular bead all the way around the inside and let that cool. When that weld cools, that metal will contract and it'll actually pull this race in just some microscopic fraction of an inch, and it'll let it come out super easily. Alright, putting our new stuff in, you just want to make sure it's nice and square. A lot of guys will take a race and try to put it in the freezer or do something else to help it get cold before they put it in, for the same reason. You want it to contract a little bit. You certainly don't want to weld it like that before you're putting it in. That's, stupid. But I don't do the freezer thing. If you want to, it's an option. I just haven't really ever felt the need, or honestly felt like it was that effective. Maybe my freezers just don't get cold enough. Our outer race is a little bit more difficult because it's all the way down here. It's a couple of maybe 3 inches in. And that makes it just a little bit tougher to get started perfectly square. They make some really cool race installer driver sets that I will link to on Amazon down in the description below that you should go buy if you're thinking about doing this job. But if you don't have one, like I don't have one right this minute, you can get it done with a brass punch. Some guys do it with steel. Moments of desperation, do what you got to do. But brass is safer and a whole lot gentler if you do miss and mess up. Like that. And I swear I didn't do that on purpose. If you had a driver set, you could even do this in something like that hydraulic press over there, and that way you'd know everything was lined up pretty square. Just a thought. If you do have to do this with any type of a drift, the key is to move around. Keep it even. Don't let one side, don't let the race get in there tilted off at an angle. That's not good for anybody. You want to keep your race nice and square and clean and straight. Now this is about the best way to grease bearings that I have found. You put the bearing inside this little plastic cup tool here, screw the lid down on it, and when I first bought this little tool probably 10 years ago, I was using it with either a hand-operated grease gun or the big pneumatic grease gun we had in the shop I was working for at the time. But now, having this Milwaukee cordless powered grease gun makes this so fast and so easy to pack these bearings and have everything as clean as it can be.
Pump some grease and then just check to see when it starts coming out of the bearing.
There we go. And then if you look right there, you can see how grease has just started to come out at the bottom of the bearing. That way you know it's nice and evenly packed all the way around. If you guys are interested in either of these tools, I'll put links to them or to the equivalent, if I can't find this exact thing on Amazon, down in the description box below. If you buy through that link, it does help support the channel. It doesn't cost you anything extra, but Amazon throws me a small fraction of a percentage for sending you over there, so I would appreciate it. All right, now this is our inner bearing, and we have to put it in now because it has to go behind the grease seal that has to go in the back of this hub. You know, I've thought a few times that an axle problem or suspension problem or anything like that would be a perfect opportunity to do a solid axle swap on this truck. For those of you that may not be familiar with this generation of Ford, it was an early attempt at independent front suspension, and the F-350s of this same era came with a standard traditional solid front axle. There are companies out there now making reverse shackle kits to put 99 through 03 leaf spring front axles under these, and they're making coil spring conversion kits to put the 05 and newer coil spring front axles into this generation of Ford truck. And that's a really, really tempting thought, but when you consider this job, all these parts here cost about $30 for everything, and on those newer axles, this is all one sealed hub unit. It doesn't have these individual serviceable bearings, and they are a couple of $100. So it does make this older stuff seem a little more cost effective to repair anyway. Now, if I could find a solid axle out of a F-350 from this era that would bolt right in, well, we might talk about that. You want to take a little grease and lubricate these splines, but you don't want to put in too much. Line up on the axle shaft. You got to line up the inner teeth on the axle shaft and the outer teeth in the hub. Make sure your O-ring is back on the hub, and then use, I like to put one of the screws through and hold it with the Allen wrench until I can kind of get things started to make sure I'm getting everything lined up correctly. For tonight, I just want to say thank you for watching, and more later. We're on our way to go pick up a broken Ram 2500 again.